Doctor Doom shouldn't exist in the main MCU timeline at all. Every version of him across 6 decades of Marvel Comics has belonged to Earth 616, the same reality Iron Man and Captain America call home. But the mask that showed up in a nursery at the end of Fantastic Four First Steps didn't come from our universe. It came from theirs. And once you actually sit with what that means, Avengers, Doomsday stops looking like a story about a villain crossing into our world and starts looking like something much stranger and much more personal than anyone's been giving it credit for. To get there, you have to ask a question most reviews of First Steps skipped entirely. Why did Marvel wait this long to make this movie in the first place? The answer has nothing to do with creative hesitation and everything to do with who actually owned the rights. Fox locked down the film rights to the Fantastic Four all the way back in 1994, specifically to keep them from reverting to Marvel, and spent the next 2 decades trying, and mostly failing, to make that investment pay off. There was the 2005 film and its 2007 sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, both fine but forgettable, notable mostly today for casting Chris Evans as Johnny Storm years before he became Captain America. Then came 2015, a critically savaged reboot that effectively killed Fox's momentum with the property for good. Marvel's first family sat frozen outside Marvel Studios' reach for 25 years, until Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox finally closed in 2019 and quietly handed the rights back. That's the real reason this movie didn't exist until now. It isn't that Marvel didn't want them, it's that Marvel legally couldn't touch them until 5 years ago, and even then, they didn't rush. Because here's the part that actually matters more than the wait itself. Once Marvel finally had the Fantastic Four back, they made an unusual choice with them. They didn't drop Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben into Earth 19999, the numbered designation for the main MCU reality, the same way every other hero has arrived. They built them an entire separate universe instead. Earth 828, a retro-futuristic alternate timeline where the Fantastic Four are the only superheroes who exist at all. No Avengers. No Spider-Man. No 20 years of continuity to awkwardly explain why nobody's heard of these 4 people before. Even the number itself is a piece of the story. A quiet tribute to Jack Kirby, the artist who co-created the team, whose birthday falls on August 28th. That's not a stylistic flourish. It's a structural decision with real narrative consequences, and it's the reason this movie feels unlike anything else Marvel Studios has released. A family this important couldn't just slot into a universe already crowded with a decade and a half of established stakes. Think about what introducing them inside Earth 19999 the normal way would have actually required. 15 years of movies where Reed Richards would have needed to plausibly never once cross paths with Tony Stark, or Sue Storm never once come up in conversation during a global-level Avengers crisis. Every prior attempt to explain that kind of absence turns into distracting narrative housekeeping instead of storytelling. Giving them their own untouched Earth erases that problem entirely. Nobody has to explain why the smartest man in the world wasn't around for Ultron, or Ronan, or Thanos, because in his universe, none of that ever happened. They needed room to be the only heroes on their own planet, which is exactly the setup Marvel used to tell their actual origin story properly. 4 years before the film begins, Reed, Sue, Ben, and Johnny are exposed to cosmic radiation during a space mission and come home changed, protectors of a world that has never needed protecting before. Then, Galactus shows up, and the entire scale of the story changes in a single scene. Silver Surfer, here reimagined as Shala Bal, descends into the middle of Earth 828 with a warning: Galactus, an entity that survives by consuming entire planets, has chosen their world as his next meal. Reed does what Reed always does, tries to outthink a problem that isn't solvable through intelligence alone, until Galactus reveals the actual terms of the negotiation. He doesn't just want the planet. He wants Franklin, Reed and Sue's newborn son, because Franklin carries something called the Power Cosmic, the same force that transformed a mortal man into Galactus himself centuries ago. In the comics, the Power Cosmic isn't just a strong ability among many. It's the closest thing Marvel has to a ceiling-less power source, capable of reshaping matter, energy, and reality itself at a scale most cosmic entities only dream of wielding. Galactus isn't looking for a meal anymore. He's looking for a successor, and he's decided this infant is worthy of the job. It's worth pausing on why that specific detail matters beyond this one movie, because Franklin Richards isn't a minor character Marvel invented to raise the stakes for a single film. In the comics, Franklin has been written, at various points, as one of the single most powerful beings to ever exist on the page, a child capable of creating pocket universes, rewriting history, and occasionally being powerful enough that other cosmic entities treat his mere existence as a threat to be managed rather than ignored. Introducing him as an infant here isn't just an emotional hook about new parents protecting their baby. It's Marvel quietly seeding the single most valuable piece of leverage in its entire cosmic hierarchy, then immediately putting him in the same room as the one villain in the franchise obsessed with acquiring exactly that kind of unchecked power. The Fantastic Four refuse, obviously, because no version of this story exists where they hand over their child. What follows is the entire back half of the film, four heroes trying to save their planet and their son from a threat that operates on a scale no team has faced in the MCU before, cosmic, ancient, and completely uninterested in negotiation. They win, eventually, using Franklin's own emerging power alongside Sue's abilities to fling Galactus and his herald into deep space, stranded so far from Earth 828 that returning could take him millions of years, if he even can. That victory is where a normal superhero movie would end. It's not where this one ends. 4 years later, inside the Baxter Building, Sue is reading to a toddler Franklin when she senses something wrong and turns to find a cloaked figure kneeling beside her son. Green cape, metal mask, his face never shown, but there's no ambiguity about who Marvel just put on screen. It's Dr. Doom, in his first real MCU appearance, and the implication is immediate. Whatever he wants with Franklin, it isn't casual curiosity. It's the exact same thing Galactus wanted. Access to a child who might be one of the single most powerful reality benders in Marvel history. Here's the detail that changes how you should be watching everything that comes next. That scene takes place entirely on Earth 828, which means the Dr. Doom kneeling in front of Franklin isn't a visitor from the main MCU timeline crossing over to threaten the Fantastic Four. He's already home. This version of Doom, the one Robert Downey Jr. is playing, comes from the Fantastic Four's own universe, not ours, a detail buried inside a single unshown mask and a title card that simply reads, "The Fantastic Four will return in Avengers, Doomsday." Sit with that for a second, because it rewrites the entire premise of the next Avengers movie. This was never going to be a story about our reality defending itself against an outside threat. It's a story about a family whose own universe's worst possible outcome has been sitting quietly in the same building as their son the entire time, waiting for them to be distracted enough to get close to him. That reframing matters even more once you understand why Doom and Reed specifically make sense as opposite numbers in the first place. Because this isn't Marvel inventing a rivalry out of convenience. In the comics, Victor Von Doom and Reed Richards were never strangers. They were classmates at State University, both prodigies, both convinced they were the smartest person in any room they entered. Doom's signature disfigurement traces directly back to that relationship, an experiment Reed warned him against. One Doom ran anyway out of pride, refusing to accept that someone else might be right. Everything about who Doom becomes afterward, the armor, the isolation, the conviction that he alone is fit to rule, grows out of that single refusal to listen to the one person who might have actually been his equal. Reed isn't just a scientist Doom happens to dislike. He's the specific proof that Doom's downfall was self-inflicted, and Doom has spent a lifetime refusing to accept that. The MCU hasn't confirmed whether it's borrowing that exact college rivalry backstory wholesale, and it's worth being upfront that this part remains a well-supported theory rather than a confirmed detail. But the shape of the dynamic Marvel has already put on screen tracks the comics closely enough that it's hard to read as coincidence. Doom kneeling beside Franklin isn't staged like a stranger sizing up a target. It's staged like someone who already understands exactly what he's looking at and exactly what it would mean to finally have something Reed doesn't. Put Franklin into that dynamic and the stakes stop being abstract entirely. Doom isn't just interested in cosmic-level power in the vague sense every Marvel villain claims to want. He's interested in the son of the one man who's always represented everything Doom insists he could have been, if the world had simply recognized his genius the way it recognizes Reed's. Taking Franklin isn't just a power grab, it's personal in a way almost nothing else in this saga has been. So how does a threat that originates entirely on Earth 828 end up colliding with the main MCU at all? This is where First Steps stops being a self-contained story and starts functioning as the actual mechanical setup for Doomsday, because Marvel already showed audiences the answer. Just not inside this movie. Thunderbolts, released earlier this year, ends with a post-credits scene depicting a ship arriving into Earth 619, a shortened version of a longer sequence that's expected to play out in full inside Doomsday itself. Put those two pieces together, and the shape of the crossover becomes clear. The Fantastic Four's home reality and the MCU's main reality are being pushed toward direct contact, universes brushing against each other closely enough to let a ship, and presumably its passengers, cross the gap between them. That's not a coincidence, and it's not a separate story thread. It's the exact mechanism this entire saga has been building toward since Loki first discovered timelines could branch in the first place. The technical term for it, one worth defining plainly since it's about to become the most important word in this entire saga, is an incursion, two separate universes forced into the exact same physical space at the exact same time. An event so unstable that one reality, sometimes both, ends up erased entirely just from the collision. Every previous incursion this franchise has hinted at has felt abstract, background lore delivered through a warning from a dying variant or a throwaway line in a Doctor Strange sequel. This is the first one with a face attached to it, a family crossing an uncrossable boundary because the alternative is leaving their son within reach of the one man determined to take him. This is also where the Fantastic Four's introduction stops being just a great standalone movie and becomes something structurally load-bearing for the rest of the saga. Every other piece of the multiverse puzzle up to this point has been about consequences without a face attached, timelines colliding, variants pruned, universes erased in the abstract. The Fantastic Four hand this saga something it's never actually had, a family, at the emotional center of the incursion crisis with a specific personal reason for why their universe and ours are about to collide. Not a prophecy, not a cosmic accident. A father protecting his son from the one man in the multiverse who spent his entire existence believing he deserves that child's power more than the family that's raising him. It's worth remembering this isn't purely a Reed and Doom story either, even if their rivalry carries the emotional core of it. Sue Storm spends First Steps established as the team's actual center of gravity, the one who talks Galactus down when Reed's calculations fail, and who ultimately channels enough of her own power alongside Franklin's to banish Galactus in the first place, which matters going forward, because any confrontation with Doom over her son is going to run through her every bit as much as through Reed. Ben and Johnny round the family out as the emotional ballast, the ones who keep this team feeling like a family unit instead of a research division, which is exactly why Marvel needed this movie to work as a family drama before it could work as a cosmic stakes prequel to Doomsday. None of the theorizing about Doom and Franklin lands with any weight if the audience doesn't already believe these four people would burn down a universe for each other. There's also a pattern worth noticing across everything Marvel's confirmed for Doomsday so far, because the Fantastic Four aren't the only hidden world being pulled into that collision. Namor and Talokan, introduced in Wakanda Forever, are also confirmed for the film, an entire underwater civilization that spent centuries deliberately staying hidden from the surface world. Stack that next to an entire alternate Earth that's existed this whole time without anyone in the main timeline knowing it was there. And a theme starts to emerge that goes beyond just cramming more characters into one movie. Doomsday isn't simply assembling heroes. It's forcing every hidden, self-contained corner of this universe, and now this multiverse, into the same room at once, whether they're ready for that exposure or not. That's also precisely why Reed Richards matters so much more than smartest guy in the room as a description. In the comics, once the multiverse actually starts collapsing during Secret Wars, it's Reed who ends up leading the handful of survivors capable of standing against Doom's rule over Battleworld, not because he's the strongest, but because he's the only person who's ever fully understood Doom, sympathized with him, and still refused to become him. If the MCU is drawing from that same well, and every piece revealed since First Steps suggests it is, then Reed isn't just another genius added to the roster before the big team-up. He's the one character whose entire relationship with Doom makes him capable of understanding exactly what Doom is planning to do with Franklin, and exactly what it will cost to stop him. Which finally answers the question this whole investigation started with. The Fantastic Four don't change everything before Doomsday because they're powerful, or because their movie was good, or because Galactus makes for an impressive villain reveal. They change everything because Marvel used their introduction to quietly solve two problems at once. They gave this franchise its first genuinely new mythology in years, untouched by 15 years of continuity, and they smuggled the actual origin of Avengers, Doomsday's central threat, inside that mythology the entire time, hiding it in plain sight behind a mask nobody got to see. Consider what that means for how the rest of this saga is likely to unfold. Every other multiverse story so far has asked the audience to care about abstract stakes, timelines that might get pruned, variants that might get erased, cosmic rules explained by a Tiva bureaucrat or a dying sorcerer. The Fantastic Four flipped that entirely. For the first time, the person capable of ending a universe isn't a stranger with vague motives. He's someone with a face, a history, and a decades-old grudge against the one family standing between him and the most powerful child in the multiverse. That's not incidental world building. That's Marvel finally giving its biggest crossover event an actual human center of gravity to hold onto once the incursions start. Doom was never coming from some far corner of the multiverse to conquer a universe that has nothing to do with him. He was always going to arrive as the thing one family couldn't protect their son from fast enough, on their own world, in their own home, and now he's following them into ours. What do you think Doom actually wants Franklin's power for once he's inside the main timeline, and do you think Reed can stop him without becoming exactly the kind of ruler Doom's always accused everyone else of secretly wanting to be? Let me know in the comments, because once Doomsday answers that, we'll be right here breaking down exactly how close this theory actually got.